Take it there? Who gon' take it there? Who gon' take it there? Who gon' take it there? Electricity, 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 electricity. You know what's in the air. 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 It's possibility. It's possibility. It's possibility. It's possibility.
So Cenk Uygur has made the decision to essentially sever ties with Francesca Fiorentini at TYT, meaning that previously Francesca had said that she would no longer be hosting her show on TYT, and that she wanted Cenk to take her show off of the TYT network. However, she would still appear on the Damage Report with John Iadarola, and there have been, Francesca and Cenk had a debate a little bit back, maybe a month or two ago, which kind of didn't go well, but it was relatively amicable. And then they've both been making comments about each other since then. Anna has repetitively mentioned Francesca, Cenk has too, and Francesca has been regularly talking about Cenk Uygur, as a lot of us have. For better or worse, he's one of the more relevant figures in this space right now. And there are reasons for that I want to get to later, because it's really what keeps bringing me back to this topic. Cenk essentially said that because of the comments that Francesca has been making about him personally, personal comments in his view, he is going to ask her to no longer host with John Iadarola at the Damage Report. So really kind of just a show of power in that situation, because really there was no need for that. I can understand if you're Cenk being annoyed that somebody is criticizing you harshly on your own program, although I don't know that she did that on the Damage Report specifically. Cenk plays a number of clips of her, and I don't think any of them are on the Damage Report. I could be wrong about that, but I think they were all on her own show or in interviews that she did with other commentators. So, for all we know, Francesca was purposely not doing that type of commentary on the Damage Report. Although Cenk seemed to feel that Francesca's commentary, specifically on the TYT network, was beyond the pale in terms of personal attacks. He compared it to Jimmy Dore's personal attacks of Francesca Fiorentini and Sam Cedar's personal attacks of Jimmy Dore. So a couple odd comparisons there. Not really something that I care to get into in this moment, because I think you have two different dynamics there with those two guys. But it was funny. That was a funny little detail that he brought up in relation to all this, because essentially what he was saying is that what Francesca is doing to him is the same as what Jimmy Dore had previously done to Francesca, that type of bullying behavior. And he also says that because he's the owner of the network and it's not just another commentator that Francesca was talking about, that, I'm going to give it some more leniency, blah, blah, blah. But eventually she just crossed the line. But it strikes me that, if she's doing, the Damage Report, and whether she's criticizing him on the Damage Report or not, it just doesn't seem to me that there's any need to step in like this, other than wanting to show that you can, because the Damage Report is John Iadarola's show. I believe that's one of the ones that is closer tied to TYT. In other words, it's not a show that John Iadarola could take on his own and move on with in the way that Francesca Fiorentini did. Maybe I'm wrong about that. And if I am, if there's any way that John Iadarola can get away from this network, I think he should. I don't know why he's still tying himself. He's one of the more popular people in the TYT network. My mother likes John Iadarola. I've heard people bring him up to me, completely absent of all of this sort of left-wing, more in-depth, lore that goes on in this space. There's a lot of people within the TYT network that kind of just show up in people's feeds, and the Damage Report is one of them. So, I don't know. At some point, it strikes me that there's got to be a line for John Iadarola. I don't want to make any demands of him. I think, he's a pretty well-liked person within this space. I don't think anybody really has any issues with him or his commentary. But it just seems like, if I was him, I would want to get away from there. But Cenk is obviously doing a show of power by stepping in, saying, I'm going to remove this person, and kind of put that black label on her. Not that he's, using language like he's going to blackball her or anything. But again, it's like she was a contributor on the damage report, and Cenk stepped in and said, you're not going to do that anymore. I mean, it seems pretty petty. And he makes pretty clear in this video that the reason is because of personal attacks against him, because he felt personally offended by the things that she had to say about him. So let me play I'm just going to play a couple clips of what he played, the clips that he played of Francesca, and then maybe some brief parts of his response, and then I'll just go over the rest of it.
I mean, I have my own thoughts on why he's doing it. I think, if you think your brain was broken by the 2024 election, I think we're looking at a case where someone's brain was broken even harder.
Okay, but look, guys, if she had said that about another host, I probably would have drawn the line there. But it's about me, so I wanted to give more leeway. My brain is broken. And by the way, that's still, okay, the first time she's getting super personal. Collaborator, maybe that's a political opinion. Now we're a broken brain, even though we were supposed to have a beer and we were supposed to hash it out and be okay afterwards, but apparently not okay afterwards.
Your argument is really bad on this and you're out of your depth. You're correct that trans women should be able to compete in women's sports, but your argument for it is just scientifically and factually incorrect. I'm actually not bad about this. I'm 100% right on this. I don't give a the scientific explanations. People, if they identify as a woman, get to compete in sports. If that's not fair in the short term for a variety of little competitions, I don't give a because the societal interest of including trans people in society trumps stupid competition. Full stop. So I'm right about this, you're wrong about it.
But then that was the tip of the iceberg. She continued again and again. Here's the next one.
I do think it's sad that even though they allow people like us into the fold and the fray, they refuse to learn from us or listen to us. And I think that when you have been doing this work for so long and you still cannot grasp the idea of intersectionality, how race and gender and class all intertwine with one another, and how the right, the fascist goal is to divide us based on these lines. I don't know who you are. I'm not even, I don't even know if you're smart. You know what I mean? I don't even know. First of all, I don't know who your political mentors are. I don't know who you look up to. I don't know what your touchstones are. I don't know if you know your history in terms of civil rights, women's rights, gay rights struggle in this country. I don't know anything. I call into question all of that.
Not done yet. One last one.
What has it got you? What did it get you? When you go and share a stage with Dr. Phil, what did it get you? Nothing. You know why? Because you look like a bitch. You know what I'm saying? You look like a bitch. That's what it is. That's just what it comes down to. You don't look like a fighter. You don't look smart. You look like a bitch. That's just the reality. I've tried to tell it to you nicely. I've tried to tell it to you cordially. I've tried to tell it to you on your show, on my show, on every show. And so either you A, are a bitch, or B, you actually agree with the right. And I'm starting to think, in fact, I do think it's the latter.
Okay. So again, if I had called her that would have been a different situation, right? But look, guys, also on the policy or the strategy, when you go talk to the right wingers, first we did that, and I mainly did that, and there was a lot of blowback saying, don't ever talk to the right wing. But they won the popular vote. How are we going to win back the voters if we never talk to them? If we don't win them back, we can't ever win an election.
So this is funny to me because he kind of does the same thing that Anna Kasparian did when she was trying to do her takedown of the majority report. It kind of just makes them look cool. I don't know. Maybe that's like an immature way of looking at it, but it does. That is the dynamic that I see here. Is like if we're talking about speaking truth to power and somebody whose commentary, the things they're saying coming from a deep place of conviction, that's what you're getting from Francesca, and Cenk even plays some clips of Emma Vigeland as well. I don't really know why. It's kind of out of context. He never really came back to it, but he wanted to play some clips of Emma Vigeland, really just one, to show that she, forcefully pushed back on somebody who was trying to correct her on the issue of trans rights and whether it makes sense to push for trans rights continually in this environment. And Emma pushes back forcefully on that, says, I'm right, you're wrong, and that, we need to support trans people, like, without exception, and that is the right course of action, the right way forward. And people who are trying to argue that the way forward is to talk less about trans people or to allow concessions when it comes to trans rights and trans people's ability to transition, that's an unacceptable way to move forward. That's essentially the dynamic that exists between Cenk and the rest of the left. And there's other things that come into play, like their talk about crime and their talk about, Tren de Aragua and stuff like that, and how all of that has been very unhelpful, and really just helped the right-wing narrative more than anything, which, by the way, they are now using the basis of Tren de Aragua to deport any and anybody they can get their hands on. And so this is what people were trying to warn Cenk and Anna about, which they really should know, which is that when you give in to these reactionary narratives and you allow them space to grow, especially on your own platform, the right wing is going to take it and run with it and use it to strip as many people of their rights as they can. And as hyperbolic as that sounds, it's exactly what's happening. It's exactly what's happening. And I know that Cenk might want to say, oh, well, you can't blame me for what the Trump administration, how much we're just one show, how much of an impact are we having by pushing these narratives which we hold to be true or whatever. But then in the same segment, he takes credit for his coverage of Trayvon Martin at the time, and somebody saying that there wouldn't have been as much national coverage of Trayvon Martin if it wasn't for TYT. And maybe that's true. But if that is true, then we can probably hold the coverage of Tren de Aragua, etc., and homeless people in LA during the fires, things like that. We can hold that under the same microscope and say there's a big impact that comes when TYT talks about something, especially when they talk about something repetitively and focused. And so, the way they're talking about Tren de Aragua and crime in general is comparable to the way that they were talking about Trayvon Martin at the time, really, really breathlessly trying to bring attention to an issue. So the point being that when they do that, they have a big impact. And so they're wondering why contributors of theirs might be revolting when they take this pivot on issues like trans people and crime. And they might say it's not a pivot, but it is. Their coverage on this stuff has changed. And maybe there were threads of these narratives that existed in their coverage for a long time, but they are choosing to center these narratives more now because they think that is where the electorate of America is moving. And Cenk talks a little bit about that here, where he says that, Republicans won the popular vote, so how are we going to win elections if we don't cover some of those same issues? So he's kind of going the same direction as any liberal would, in the sort of Jon Favreau Pod Save America realm, which is essentially the contention is Democrats tried the liberal approach. They tried going left on trans people and things like that, and even immigration, they would say, which is a lie, but I'll get to that. They tried that and it failed. They failed to win the election. And so what Democrats have to do, at least on some issues, is follow Republicans to the right. And they have to take guidance from the Republican narratives and capitulate on some of those things to win back the common sense vote. That's the contention. And really, I think that's the conclusion you come to if you sort of already wanted to abandon those issues in the first place. And really the difference between Francesca Fiorentini, Emma Vigeland, and Cenk Uygur on trans issues is that they come from a deeply held belief on the issue, and they are not willing to throw people under the bus for the supposed sake of winning elections. And the thing is that I think it's a misreading of the data on what happened in this previous election. And pretty much all of the media is doing it. And it's frustrating that TYT is doing it as well, because they could be pushing back on this narrative in a very powerful way. And the reason TYT gets all of this attention is because they are a very powerful network, and they have the ability to shape some of these narratives. And so the idea that, Kamala Harris tried a left-wing campaign and that's why she was rejected, I don't think is borne out in the data. If you look at some parts of it, if you look at some, demographics that shifted to the right a bit, you can find some evidence that there are people who were put off or who were convinced, let's say, by negative ads from the Trump campaign about trans issues and that sort of thing. But honestly, I really think that's negligible. If you look at the amount of people that Trump won, even the popular vote, if you look at that vote share that Trump won the popular vote with, we're not seeing a big shift from Democrats to Republican that explains that popular vote win. That is not the explanation for how Trump was able to win the popular vote. And so it's almost a sleight of hand to say we have to be less bullish on trans rights because it's a losing issue for Democrats, when really a big part of the real shift that happened in the electorate is with young people. And Trump even said this, that TikTok is a big way that they were able to reach people and get out the vote. And this is why Trump wanted to negotiate with TikTok, at least partially, because he recognizes it was a powerful vehicle for them in this election. And they did bring out a significant amount of Gen Z voters, particularly men. And so Kamala Harris had that same moment. She had the ability to bring out those same voters. The idea that left-wing young people are just destined and that it's a foregone conclusion that they're not going to come out to vote is not true, because in these election cycles, you repeatedly see young people coalescing around a candidate or around an issue set that they would like to vote for. You see it with Bernie Sanders and even the other offshoots of Bernie Sanders like Elizabeth Warren. And in this election, when Kamala Harris entered the race, she received an enormous amount of fanfare amongst those same young voters, people on TikTok, a younger generation of voters, many of whom were not able to vote last time or were not even old enough to pay attention to politics, who are college educated, or they're in college, or they're actively pursuing certain political issues on TikTok and that sort of thing. They're learning about these things. And a lot of these voters were concerned about Gaza and Joe Biden's facilitating of the genocide in Gaza. And Kamala Harris had an opportunity to break with him on that issue. And I genuinely believe that I don't know if that would have meant she won the election, but when I look at it, what I see is that Democrats had an opportunity to say to their base, we see that you are demanding a certain thing of us, and we see that we have an opportunity to win over a new generation of voters with a pretty small shift in policy. We just have to stop the raining of bombs, of US-made and paid for bombs in Gaza. And we have to stop thinking that we can brush this under the rug and assume that voters are stupid and are more focused on what's in front of their face. Because yes, bread and butter issues are important, but the gamble that Kamala Harris made is that the issue of Gaza is not going to be a make or break. And rather, if they focus on bread and butter issues, and if they focus on mirroring the Republican rhetoric on the border, and at least providing, they viewed that was an issue that they needed to provide a similar counterpoint. That Republicans, voters, and voters in general had made clear that they want the type of rhetoric that we hear from Republicans on the border. And so Democrats served us a version of that. And they thought that by doing that, by being competitive with the Republicans in that way, that they would win over enough of the voter share that the people who are activated by the issue of Gaza would be inconsequential. They made that bet and they lost. They lost. And, there's a lot of factors to it. I'm not saying there aren't, but I'm saying that I was saying before the election, if Kamala Harris doesn't make the right moves on Gaza, I think it's going to be a make or break issue for her campaign, because an enormous amount of the excitement that she had when she first was announced as the candidate was around the fact, is she going to take this opportunity to break from Biden? And yes, she could have offered some better policies in other places too. She could have had much better rhetoric on immigration. She could have had much better rhetoric on healthcare. I don't think she really had any rhetoric at all on healthcare. Maybe some stuff about drug prices. So really, if you're looking at a left-wing voter base, or even a moderate left-wing voter base, and the issues that they care about, it seems very clear to me that the losing issue, the losing strategy for Democrats is focusing on what Republicans tell us is important and what the Republican narrative setting creates momentum around. And because of that, because Democrats chased that and they chased Republican voters, Kamala Harris made a very concerted strategy to win over Republican voters in this last election. And that failed. So the idea that she was running to try to win over all the trans people or win over everybody to the far extreme left, and that's a failed strategy, it's completely not true. And that's ultimately the basis behind why Cenk is saying that he needs to separate himself from Francesca Fiorentini and the rest of the left, because he views these as extreme left positions. And the other thing that he does that really doesn't sit right is he allows for this sort of distorting of the framing, where Piers Morgan at one point asked Francesca Fiorentini that if Floyd Mayweather decided he wanted to box as a woman, would she think that's okay? And Francesca Fiorentini answered yes. So what's happening here is that they're trying to create the framework where you're saying, can any man at any point say, I'm a woman, and get in the ring with women, or, get on the field with women, or whatever it is. That's where they want the conversation to be. And in some cases, that's where they think the issue set is. But really, that's not what this is about at all. We're talking about trans people who not only are going to be matched up with people that they are a competitive match for, but also these are people who go through many stages of transitions throughout their life. And in probably most cases, of which there are very few anyway, by the time they get to a point of competing with men or women based on their preferred gender, this is somebody who has already gone through many stages of transition and is going to be matched with the people that they're best matched with. And there is no data that shows that trans people in sports are dominating in any category. And at no point has that been what fuels this. And so, Cenk uses this as a point to say, of basically disqualifying Francesca Fiorentini. And I don't know if yes was the right answer there, but what she was doing is she's saying the commitment to trans rights supersedes the sort of silly, exaggerated straw man argument that you're trying to make. So even in this exaggerated scenario that you're presenting, the answer is still yes. That was Francesca Fiorentini's strategy in that moment. It might have been a misstep because it does look bad to say that Floyd Mayweather can box with women just because he wants to. But the point is that nobody's making that argument, and there's no reality. There's not even a shred of reality to that proclamation and that framework. And so for Cenk to use that as something that discredits Francesca Fiorentini, not only is he purposely discrediting somebody on the left who's making a valid point and making very good points about standing up for trans people and how denigration of any minority group is all intertwined, but he's also, once again, supporting this right-wing framework that is ultimately dragging America to the far right. And so Cenk, proclaims over and over again that his goal is to build coalitions that can, get some of these things passed, like Medicare for all, et cetera, et cetera. And yet everything about the direction that he's angling himself in is pretty clearly dragging us to the right. And his strategy seems to be to go along with the tide, the manufactured tide that is dragging this nation to the right, because that's the way to win elections and get these bills passed. And I think he's wrong, because the stronger coalition exists on the left, the real populist left that really wants populist issues, not just as an aesthetic. And the problem electorally that we're facing is that no political party has done any effective job at organizing those people at all. But you're not going to create that momentum on the right, because those right-wing voters are going to go for Republicans. That's what they've done, and that's what they're going to do. And there are a bunch of people who are not activated in the political process right now that we need to focus on, and they do not want to hear this reactionary shit.